Hi everybody. Hopefully I'm live here. I'm going to get a picture so I can see a little better what I'm doing. How is everybody this evening? See if I can type here and talk at the same time. Make sure you say something when you come in and I know that you can hear me and everything. Oh great. Hi Lynn. Have you been working on your quilt today? Colleen? I know Colleen has been. And so is Lynn today. Hi Diane. How is everybody this evening? Oh, just a second here. I need to scroll. I can't see. Oh, here we go. Deb's here. Teresa's here. Hi everybody. There's a few of you. If there's still people that need the designs and stuff, they're up on the website. So you can get the designs for love notes and the embellishment kit. Ready for the snow, yeah. It sounds like we might be kind of yucky tomorrow. So I'm going to try to get groceries here in town instead of driving to Anamosa. My dad told me I couldn't come up tomorrow, so he didn't want me on the road. How is everybody this evening? Yeah, so I've been doing some pre-sewing tonight. Or during the day today, I wanted to pre-sew some of the borders and stuff because we're going to be talking about the Quilt As You Go borders, and I'm going to do one of those, one of the Technique 2 blocks, like for all the blocks that are cut the right size. I'm going to do one of those tonight, and then we're going to do a border. I'm going to show you how to do a border. Yeah, you know, Marcia, I think it's my microphone. I'm looking into a new microphone. I think the microphone's weird, and I've noticed that some of my videos sound a little, the audio's not very good. So I think something's changed with, this is the first time, Facebook has changed some settings and stuff, and I think I need a different microphone. So I'm going to work on that. So, but we're going to do one of the blocks that are like cut to the right size, so that for the second technique, and so because like in this quilt, you know, a bunch of the blocks are cut to size. Like there's a bunch of little filler blocks that are like 2.5 by 2.5. They turn out 2 by 2. There's this bigger one. This is the one we're going to do tonight. This longer one on the first row. So you do need to quilt those as well. So when you put them together, it's all got batting in it. So I am going to do one of those tonight, and then we're going to do some borders. So like I did some pre-sewing today. Here's some of my borders that I've already quilted. So like here's one of the little sashing borders, the little narrow ones. So I did those, and I'm just making a wall hanging, so I had, you know, 2 short ones. These are the little short ones for the ends, because I'm not doing the whole quilt. And let's see, here's my bigger ones. So I'll show you how this works. It's really fun, actually. So this is the shorter ones for my wall hanging, and then here's the longer one of the longer ones. And it's all quilted as you go, and it has the batting in it already. So I'll show you how to do this. It's really fun. And we're going to start, though, with the blocks. So like I have all my blocks sewn together. And we'll talk a little bit about sewing them together at the end, because when I sew them together, I usually open the seams up, because they are kind of bulky if you don't open them up. So I would definitely tell you to open the seams up when you sew them together. So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. Okay, just a second here. Let me get these out of the way so I won't drop everything on the floor. And I wanted to remind you that there are still some of the fill in the blank, you know, the tote bag. The tote bags that Kimberbell's doing for the fill in the blank program, and then this is the new February one. Isn't that cute? It says "Life is short, eat the cake," and it's a little towel. Aren't these cute? They're ombre towels. They're darker, and then they get lighter. Isn't that neat? I thought they were really cool. And then there's a green one that comes with it too. So. But that's the February one. I can't release it till 1st of February, but it's up on the website under Fill in the Blank, and you can order it. The towels, so you get 2 towels, and it's $14.95, and you get the free design. And then Lynn made the video this month, so you'll get a free video also about how to make those. So it was really fun. There's some embroidery leather in it. There's embroidery leather white, and there's some red at the top. So it was really fun to do. So I wanted to let everybody know that that's available on the website under fill in the blank. And there are still some January ones, so you can still get the January one if you want the sparkle tote design. So, okay, so let's get started. We actually have a lot to do tonight. Are there any questions? If the people that are working on their designs or on Love Notes, are there any questions about the doing the blocks, or is everybody doing okay with the blocks? I know Lynn's been working on her block. She says she's in section 3. So I know people are working along with me, so I've been seeing pictures, and if you watch the group, there's been a couple people that have put pictures up now, so, okay? All right, so let's talk about, the first thing I want to talk about is doing one of these blocks with technique 2. Now, the block at the end of row 1 that I'm doing, this big plain block, so it'll be right here, is actually kind of an odd size. So when you look at these, I'm going to turn my camera down here so you can look at the book. Oh, Pat, you got started row 4 today. Awesome. That one has quite a few blocks in it. So when you go into it's the same way as with what we talked about last time. You have to go find the actual finished size of your block, and then that's the one you find for the quilt as you go. And then there's a chart, and it tells you what to cut. But and there are two. Just a second here, let me get to some of the blocks here. Okay. Here's one that's the words for the Valentines. Okay. And so you got to find a block that's the size that it's finished. Well, this block actually is 6 by 12. And if you look at all of the block sizes, the biggest block they make is 8 by 10. So it's actually an odd size. So what I ended up having to use for this was actually a border chunk, and that worked out just fine. And I did it the same way, but it was just technically a border design instead of a block design. So those are, and we're going to talk about those more tonight anyway, but they're marked as borders here, and they're digitized slightly differently because they don't sew across the tops and the bottoms like the blocks do. Okay? What page am I on? Okay, so what I'm going to be doing, Janet, is we're going to talk about the borders. So what I'm doing is I'm going to my borders in this is all just my Kimberbell quilting designs that I bought from Kimberbell. So you have to go to mykimberbell.com to get all of these. And I just printed out a book with all the instruction sheets. So I have them all in my book, and I put them in alphabetical order so I could find them, okay? So what I'm going to look for is I'm going to do this one, and I picked my Border Valentine 2 for this particular block. It's these really cute hearts, because that's the only one that I could find that was roughly the right size. All of the other ones were too small. They were either too wide and too short, or they were just not the right size. So anyway, this worked out fine. I just used this piece of border. So I'm going to go on here, and I found my 6 by 12. So there was actually a 6 by 12 border chunk, and it worked really great. So I'm going to use that design. I have brought that one up in my machine, and it's 6 by 12 border right here. And this is my design. Okay? So we're going to use this one for this block. And I'm going to set it, and I'm going to hit embroidery. So I'm ready to do the embroidery, okay? Then, per the instructions, remember we talked about this last time, that there's going to be these borders and sashings, and these are the same as the block patterns that they have. But they have this little chart that tells you pick the size of your, the width of your border. In this case, I wanted a 1.5 inch border, and this one was a 6.5 inch border. It's not really a border, it's just going to be a block, but we needed a 6.5 because it's finished 6 by 12. It tells you again how to cut your batting. So I cut my batting 6.5 by 13, And my finished block of my finished block is going to be 6 by 12, and that's the name of the file. So remember they name the files the name of the finished block, okay? So technically, like I said, this is a border, but we're going to just use it one time. You can just use it one time, and it worked out just great, okay? So I'm going to go back and show you one of these blocks and what it talks about technique 2. The instructions for technique 2, that's what I'm going to use. And what it does is you're going to put your batting on just like we did before, and I'm going to go through all of this. And then when you go to put your fabric in, remember the fabric is the size you need it. So we need to make sure that we tape it down carefully when we go to put it into the little, they give you a little like placement line here. And you're going to tape it down so that you won't take the chance of your foot going off that fabric and pulling it up. Okay? So that's one thing that you have to do with technique 2. Technique 2 is not the method that they recommend if you can use larger fabric. But if you have these pre-cut pieces, like we do a few of them, then this is the technique you need to use. Like the other one you would use it for would be your pieced blocks, those piece blocks with the X's and O's. Okay? Because those come out the size you need them. So those are actually going to finish 4 by 4. So just check the size of your finished block so you're getting the right size. Okay? All right, so we're going to do this one. And it's really quite easy to do. We're just going to do the first step right here. This is the first step. I'm going to turn this down here so you can see I've got cat hair in the middle of everything, of course. Okay? And we're going to sew out the placement line. I have no-show mesh stabilizer in my hoop. This is an 8 by 12 hoop for this one because I didn't want to have to, I just had the hoop at one time and it was 12 inches long. And so no-show mesh, I have bobbin thread in the bobbin, and I have my white embroidery thread on the top because I actually am quilting my entire quilt with white thread. You can quilt your quilt any way you want. I just used white for mine, so it would kind of match. A lot of the background fabrics were light colored, and I thought white looked good. So, okay, so it's going to go around and do my placement line here, and this placement line is for the batting. So we're going to place the batting first. Okay, so I'm going to put my piece of batting up here. Now, the one thing I would tell them, and I'm going to do this the next time I do some borders this way. Their batting is a little skimpy this way, width-wise, because it's a little hard to trim. So I'd probably tell you to add a ½ inch to the width of the batting. The length is fine, but the width is a little bit skimpy. So, oops, sorry, my camera decided it was going to go out of focus, so hopefully it'll stop doing this. Just a second, it'll go back once it stops moving. Sorry, every now and then it'll do that on Facebook, so come on. My camera gets blurry and then it will finally refocus itself, but it's being contrary tonight. Are you still hearing me okay? Are you still hearing me all right? Everybody say something and let me know if you're hearing me okay. Or did we freeze? If we froze, we may have to come back. Can you still hear me? But we're not focusing. Come on. It's not focusing. Can you see anything, or is it just really blurry? We may have frozen. You can hear me. Okay, so everybody can hear me all right, but is it blurry? It's still blurry. On my end. Is it blurry on your end? Okay. Now let me know if it's blurry on your end, because I can't tell. Blurry. Okay. I'll look on my phone here too. Sorry guys. Every now and then we'll have this problem, and normally it clears up. We can hear you, but it's blurry. Okay. Normally it clears up after a couple seconds, but it's not clearing up tonight. Really blurry, yeah, I agree. Oh, there it goes. Look at there. I think it's okay now. Facebook is lovely, isn't it? Okay, so we got our batting on here. We'll just continue on. I think we're okay now. The batting is over the placement line, and we're going to go ahead and tack this batting down. This is step number 2. So is it better now? Can everybody see better now? I'll wait a second and see if you catch up with me. You're about 30 seconds behind me, so I'm just going to go look on it here and see if it looks any better. Is it okay now? Okay, great. Somebody said it was okay now. Awesome. Okay, so now we're on to step number 2. I've got my batting over my placement line, and we're going to go ahead, and I'm just going to kind of hold this because it does want to scoot. Like I said, I would probably tell you to cut your batting about a ½ an inch wider because it's a little skimpy on the edges, on the sides, and it makes it just a little bit hard to trim, and you got to be careful that your foot doesn't catch it on the edge. So the next time I do this, I'm going to cut my batting pieces just a little bit wider. Because you're going to be trimming it off anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I am kind of holding this because, like I said, it's pretty skimpy on the sides. I'm just going to go around it twice. Okay, cool. So now I think it's a little bit better. You let me know if the focus goes back out again. It looks like it's pretty decent. Yeah, I don't know. Facebook is weird sometimes. I don't think it's my camera. I think it's Facebook because it does this every now and then for me. So, because the camera never does that when I'm just making like videos and stuff. It's just when I'm on Facebook. So, okay, so it's going around it twice. And for those of you who weren't here last week, these were the designs that I bought from Kimberbell. These are the Kimberbell quilting designs. So you do have to go and buy those from Kimberbell. It's on mykimberbell.com, and you can buy, they have a whole bunch of them. I finally just bought them all. They have a whole bunch of them. There's all different ones you can use. There's quite a few borders now. So you can get any ones you want, and there's several that were made just for. So I'm going to trim this now. I'm trimming this close to the stitches. This is my batting, and I'm just using my. Probably can't see me trimming the bottom here. You know how to trim. You've seen me trim before. Now this is what's hard to trim. See how thin this is? Let me get my scissors up here a little farther, and you'll be able to see it. This is so narrow on the edges. It makes it really hard to trim. I am using Hobbs 80/20 batting. You can use, the one batting I tell you not to use is Warm and Natural. It's so heavy and so stiff. Hobbs 80/20 is softer and it's a little bit loftier. So it makes all the designs look really cute because it just makes them a little more lofty. I like Dream Cotton as well. But this is Hobbs 80/20, so it's like scraps that I use from quilting. Like Judy brings me scraps from when she quilts. So, okay, so we got it trimmed all the way around, and again, you saw that it was a little harder to trim on this edge because it was so narrow. So, I would probably tell you, cut your batting about a ½ an inch wider, not longer, wider than it says, because I think it'd just be easier to get a hold of the edges of it, and there's a little bit more wiggle room. So, okay, then the next step is going to be the placement line. Now, since this, for the fabric, since this one is actually a border, it's only going to do placement lines along the sides down here. Okay, and normally on the blocks it's going to do the placement line all the way around, but this was just a border design because of the size of the piece. So it's just going to do pieces, actually no, I think it is going to go across the top too, but not outwards. So it's going to do, and you can see it's going to go outside of the cutting line. And it did go across the top, but it's going to go down, and it's going to give me about a ½ of an inch on either side of the batting to let me know where to put my fabric. So this is a placement line for the fabric. And again, when you do the actual block designs, it would be 1/4 of an inch above the top and the bottom too. Okay, so you have to kind of eyeball this a little bit to put this one in. So now, since this is cut the size we need it, I'm going to place my block evenly distributed. And normally with your regular blocks, you're not going to have this problem. I just have to do a little eyeballing since it was such an odd size. And then we are going to tape this around the outside edge, because you don't want this to scoot and you don't want your foot. So tape, you know, as far out on the edge as you can. And I pretty much taped all the way around this. I'm going to cut some more tape here. But you don't want, the edges you're going to be pretty much okay, because since this was a border, it's a little bit narrower. It doesn't go all the way out to the edge, but the block designs do. So they recommend that you tape all the way around the block. So we're going to get some more tape. I just didn't have all my tape cut, so we're going to get some more tape here. Make sure that it's inside these lines, and I don't know if you can see them. I did them in white, but you can kind of see the stitches right here. I'm just going to make sure the edges of my block line up with that. But I'm definitely going to tape down as much of this as I can, because it will, you don't want it to scoot on you, and you don't want your foot to get caught, because that's kind of nasty when that happens. So we're going to tape this down. And so when you're doing those little piece blocks and like those little 2.5 inch blocks, all those little filler blocks, this is how you would do it, because those are all cut to the right size. So we're going to tape this down. I just hate it when my foot gets caught on things. So we're going to turn this over and we'll tape the other side too. So I've got this inside my line, the placement line, and it's all along here. See if I can get a little bigger piece this time. And then I'll just cut this up and use it, you know, use it again, but works good, and then I don't have to worry about my foot. I am always worried about catching things, so I don't like, I actually bent one of my feet because I caught it. So, okay, so there we go. So I got the whole thing taped all the way around, okay? Then we're going to put this back in here, and the next thing that's going to happen is it's going to tack it down. Now, tack the fabric down. Now, normally on the block patterns, it's going to tack it around all 4 sides, but this particular one, again, was a border, so it's just going to do the sides, the 2 long sides, but it'll still be fine. So it's going to, and if it sews through your tape a little bit, don't worry, because that's going to be in the seam allowance. And this paper tape actually comes out of the stitches pretty easily. So see how it just went on the side, and then it's going to skip over and do this side. And it's going to, I'm going to hit my tape, I always do. But it's going to hold it down so it won't move. Looks like I did a pretty good job of getting it in there straight, so we're going to be good, I think. Okay. So now we got that fabric all attached to the hoop for this block, and now we're going to do, whoops, second here, get the cat hair off of it. Now it's the design. So now we're just going to sit here and watch it do this cute little design, and it's all hearts. Now you could do some of your placement lines and stuff in a darker color if it makes it easier for you to see, but I just didn't want to change the thread, so I was lazy and did it all in white. So I didn't have to change the thread. But this will be that large block at the end. I mean, I'll get my actually finished quilt while this is sewing. I finished walling here. So you can see that block. It turns out really cute. And here's the block. This is the one we're talking about. I'm going to turn this up here while it's sewing. So this is the block we're doing right here. And it turned out so nice, and then that's the one you're going to hang your pictures over. So when I started working on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's not a 6 by 12 block. But I think they tried to keep most of their block designs down in size so that you didn't have to have anything really bigger than about an 8 by 12. I think a couple of them you have to have 9 by 14 hoop to do, but I know that they were probably trying to keep them down, so they didn't do some of these odd size blocks. So it's just going to sew this entire little heart design here, and then we'll be done with this block, and then I'll show you how to do the borders. I really enjoyed doing these. These have been really fun, and the designs are so cute. Now we're actually going to use the same designs for the sashing and the border that I'm going to do tonight this way. We're going to do it on the other quilt that I'm going to do traditionally, but we're going to use those same designs because I found that I could use those really easily in the sashings and the borders too. So we'll do that next week. This one actually stopped. It was funny. It actually stopped in the middle and then cut and then did another section. So I wasn't expecting that because most of them just went from top to bottom and never stopped, but this one did. I think it's going to look good. And with any luck at all, we won't go off the edge. Looks like it's going to be okay, I think. It's actually not quite 6 by 12. The design is like, or 8 by 12, I should say. It's actually, no, it was 6. It's actually like 11.75, so there we go. I think it's done. There we go. Woohoo! Isn't that pretty? Hopefully you can see it. I'll pull this back so you can see it really well. Kind of neat. So there's that last block, and it's all quilted. And that one I just used that border design on. So that's the design I did on there. And I did a different one on my big quilt that I quilted in Design Center. I used one of the decorative fills in it, and it was really pretty too. So I really like that. So that looks great. So then what I'll do, when I take this out of the hoop, I'm just going to leave it in here for now because we'll go on to the borders. But then I will trim, you trim it right along the fabric line because, this is the size you actually need it. So you're just going to trim right around the outside edge. Talks about that in the instructions as well. And you're going to leave the stabilizer in there. And then this block I'll put on the end of my wall hanging. So, okay? So that is the technique 2 for those the blocks that are the size that they're supposed to be. So that's another way that then you can finish quilting the whole thing that way. Okay, so we did that. Now we're going to talk about these sashings. Let's do a sashing. So I have this old hoop, but I love this old hoop for like little narrow long things. This is an old border hoop that Brother had, and I'm not sure that I can get this one anymore. There are a couple of borders. There are a couple of border hoops. One of them is only 7 inches long, and this one is 12. So I used the 12-inch design, so I chose this one. Not positive I can still get this hoop. I know I can for the PR, but I'm not sure about the home machine. They've discontinued a couple things, and this one seems to be one, so I'll do some checking for you. But I like this because I don't waste so much stabilizer. I can use some 15 by 15 square stabilizers, and I can get 2 hoopings out of it. So that's why I chose this hoop. So let's talk about these sashings. Let's do one of these little narrow sashings. Oops, second. So what you got to do is you cut your sashing pieces the length that you need them and add a couple inches. Maybe, I think I might have added almost 3 inches, okay? And all the fabric, just like we did our blocks, has shape flex attached to the back. So I did that on my sashing strips as well, and on that block that I just put in, it also had the shape flex on the back of it, okay, to stabilize it. I think the reason they do that, I wasn't convinced that you needed to put it on, but I think the reason they do that is because you have to line it up, and it's loose on the edges, like on the edges, and I think with that being on there, it just gives it more body, and it's not going to scoot around so much when they're doing the tack downs. So I have been putting the shape flex on the back. So this needed to be about, let's see, I think I've got it written here. I think mine needed to be 33 inches long. I think my sashing strip actually needed to be, the long ones, I should say, needed to be about 31. So I added a couple of inches to it. But it's the length, it's the width that it's supposed to be. So it's 1.5 inches, okay? Then it told me in my instructions, so I used Valentine border number 1 for this one. No, border number 2. So I used number 2 for this one as well. So I'm going to go back here to my borders, Valentine number 2. Find it here. That's the next one. And I know these strips, these were 1.5 inches, so they needed to be, it's actually going to finish 1 inch, because you're going to take a 1/4 inch seam on either side. So they're going to be 1 inch, and then I wanted to not have to hoop it any more times than really was necessary. So I did use the 12-inch, the 1 inch by 12 inch border, because I like this hoop. It's 12 inches, and I had to hoop it 3 times. So that wasn't too bad to do that long border. And you could have done it with a 14-inch hoop if you wanted, but I like this little old border hoop, and it saved me a lot of stabilizer. So, okay, so my sashing ended up being, like I said, it's about 31 by, it's going 1.5. So we're going to go back and into that same border file, and we're going to get the other size, which is 1 by 12. Now, the one thing I did notice with this, when we get there, you'll see, they must have made a mistake when they did this particular design, because when you go to do the connections, it actually sews someplace that it shouldn't. So you have to rip a few stitches out, just so you know. It must just be this one design, because all the other ones have been fine. So, all right, so borders, Valentine, this was Valentine 2. So here's borders Valentine 2. And then we're going to choose the one that's 1 by 12. And I'm going to set it and embroidery. So this is just going to have little hearts all the way down. And we're going to use the same design on the quilt next week when we do the traditional or the more traditional quilting. All right, so I'm going to put this in the, I've got, again, my no-show mesh stabilizer in my hoop. And I am going to, oops, second here. There we go. My camera doesn't want to move tonight. And put this in the hoop. Got that in the hoop, still got my bobbin thread in the bobbin. I'm going to see if I've got enough bobbin thread. I think I do. Yep. For this. And then I'm going to do the first step, again, in the instructions, is going to be, whoops, second here, let me turn the page, is going to be the placement line for the batting. So we're going to do that first. Get this up a little bit so you can see it better. And we're going to sew out step number 1. And again, you know, if it's easier for you to see, put a colored thread in here. I'm just lazy and don't want to have to change the thread. I had to cut in my chart, just like it did for my blocks. It told me how big I had to cut my pieces of batting, and the batting on this one was, let's see, these borders, since they were the 1 by 12, you cut the batting 1.5 by 13. And again, I would tell you, instead of 1.5, I tell you to cut it 2 inches, because I think it'd just be a little easier to trim. And these were cut narrower, just because I did them all this morning, okay? So here's my placement line. And this is just kind of magic, doing these borders and sashings. It was just really fun. So we're going to put this over the line. You're going to have to be a little careful and hold this. So step number 2 is to tack this down, and then we're going to trim it. But they don't give you any too much batting, so I would say do the extra ½ an inch. So I tell, instead of 1 1/2, I tell you to do only 2 inches. It could just be a little easier. You'll waste a little bit more batting, but it'd be easier to trim. Okay, so here's so we're going to start out the same way we did for that block. And this is going to be the actual border. It's magic how they get this all to match up and everything. It was so cool. I've never done this before, and I thought it was so much fun. So I did cut, like I figured out I was going to have to hoop this 3 times. The last hooping will be a little short. Like you'll sew on batting and no fabric, but it doesn't matter. You can just trim it off. So I'm going to do this whole sashing so you can see what it looks like. It's really cool. All right, so we're going to trim this. So now the next step is trimming the batting. We're going to trim the batting here all the way around. A second here. Hopefully I didn't mess the camera up again here. And I do apologize. Sometimes when I trim, it's hard to keep it on the camera. So we'll get this trimmed. And like I said, it is a little easier if you've got a little bit more to hang on to on the edges especially. The top and the bottom are okay, but they needed to be a little less skimpy, I think, with the batting. So I will definitely do that next time I do this. I want to do we're going to do the Hoppy Easter pillow, bench pillow in March for Easter, and I think Easter's the first weekend in April this year. Oh, Lynn, do you have this border hoop too? I love this little border hoop. I have, there's a short one, and you could use the short one because they have 5x7. They have 5x7 designs too, and you can just use the 5x7 designs. You have to hoop more times, but it would work great. I love this old hoop, and I use it. So, okay. So then what it tells you to do is to, we have to get this on and centered over here, but first we need a placement line. So we're going to do the placement line for the fabric. So we got this tacked down. Now we need a placement line for our fabric. So when you start, I'm going to find another piece of tape because I left my tape on my block. Now what I found that works best for me on the top, they tell you to take tape and roll it up in a little roll like this, and I'm going to do that at the bottom, but at the top it's easier for me just to tape it down. They want you to extend, and the reason they have you do this about 2 inches longer, you need to extend it over the batting, maybe they say about a ½ an inch. And I don't know that I do mine quite that much, but about a ¼ an inch. And it's easier for me just to tape it up here and just put a piece of tape up there to hold it, okay? And then when you get down here, the little roll of tape works really well because I can just put this little roll of tape right down here. I just rolled it up so it's sticky all the way around. And put the little roll of tape right there, and then you want to make sure your edges are inside those batting, or that placement line, and bring this down and stick it down at the bottom of the hoop. And that works really slick down here to do it that way. And you just want to make sure it's straight. Now there's not a whole lot of fabric here. This is a little narrow border, so you do have to you're going to have to kind of hold this when you go to do it. So the next thing is going to be the tack down line. Now for the fabric. Now this is the one that I think they made a mistake on, because most of the borders just tack on the sides and there's nothing right here because you're going to continue on. Now this one does go over the bottom, and it must just be a mistake in this particular pattern or this particular size. So it is going to go across the top in a square again, even though the rest of them are all going to be just down the sides, okay? So I had to pick out a few stitches right across there. And you do have to kind of watch this because it's pretty close to the edges. There we go, that looks good. So here's our tacked down piece of fabric, right inside that nice little placement line. And now I'm ready to do the actual quilting. And the next step is the fun one. We get to learn how to hook them together. So when you have this same hoop, this what is it, 4 by 12, I think. Now, the bigger borders won't fit in here. So this is only about 4 inches wide, the sewing field. So when I did my bigger border for my wall hanging, I actually cut it down to 3.5-inch strips instead of 4.5-inch strips, because for the quilt they're wider, but this one I wanted narrower borders on it since it was a smaller piece. So it's doing the little hearts. But all of this is right in the instructions, and it tells you exactly what to do. Makes it very, very easy, and it hooks together so cool you can never tell where you started and stopped. Okay, so now this is the first hooping. You can see it's all quilted, and the next step then is to remove this from the hoop, and we need to trim the stabilizer off. So I'm just going to do that quick with my scissors. You can also do that with your rotary cutter, but that way I don't have to get up from the machine. Now, the reason I like this old hoop, pull this back a little bit so you can see. The reason I like this old hoop, see the little buttons right here on the end? There's a little button here, a little button on the other end, and if you push them, they pop up, and everything comes out really fast. So I've always loved this old hoop for that. So let me grab my scissors here. And we're just going to trim the stabilizer off around the edge of the fabric. And I've been doing this with my rotary cutter all day, but I just didn't want to have to get up. So I figured we could just do this with the scissors. Just careful don't cut your fabric, because remember, that's the actual size you needed, so don't cut into your fabric. And then don't cut the tail off. You know, we got this tail here. We don't cut that off. Okay, and I'm going to pull that little piece of tape out of there, off the bottom. And I'm going to trim the stabilizer away from where that tail is, because we don't want that in there either. And I'm going to go up the other side. But we will leave the stabilizer in, of course. And this is, again, the no-show mesh. The whole thing's done with no-show mesh. All right. But this made this really nice, and I'll just leave the little tail on the end. Okay. So now we've got this piece, that's quilted to here, right? And then we got the rest of this to quilt. So this is where the magic starts. It's pretty awesome. So I'm going to put another piece of stabilizer in here. And I got these 15 by 15 square pieces that are pre-cut that just fit in this hoop just perfect. So they slide in the hoop here. And then these two little things right here, and on the other end, they would just clamp down like that. So it makes it really fast to get the hoop re-hooped again. And I'm going to leave the same design in. This is the same design that we're going to use for the second piece. Just going to hit OK. And again, what was the first thing we did? We did a placement line for the batting. So we're just going to sew it again. Get another piece of batting. Well, I'll lose my batting here. I have a bunch of stuff on my lap, so I don't want to drop everything on the floor. So this is our batting line for the second hooping. And like I said, I think they had these 1.5 by 13, but I'd say cut them 2 by 13. It'd be a little easier to trim. Okay, so there's that placement line. Okay, I'm going to slide this in over my placement line. And, oops, bring it down a little bit. And then the second step. Whoops, I have very rough hands, so I grab my batting and it pops up on me. And we're going to put this down, and then we're going to do the second step, which again is the tack down line for the batting. Just watch that batting because it does scoot a little bit. Usually when I do like in the hoop things with batting and stuff, and then I cut my batting a little extra big. I know it might waste a little bit of batting, but it sure makes it easier to trim and stuff. So it's going to go around it twice. Yeah, I know, isn't it cool? I like this old hoop, and like I said, I know I can get the short one, but I'm not sure that I can get this long one anymore. I noticed there was still the Quattro, this came with the Quattro upgrade number 3 years ago, and I saw them still on the Brother website today, but, you know, it's like, you know, it makes the hoop like $399. They're not cheap. I'm not going to, I mean, I'll tell you, they're not cheap hoops. But, I used to be able to get it by itself, so I'm going to do a little checking and see if I can still just get the hoops, so, because you don't need the upgrade. So we're going to go ahead and trim this again. That's the next step, is to trim close to the stitches, the batting. Oops. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Yeah, you could do that, Denise. Denise asked if we could use some glue stick. I think that would help, but if you just make your batting a little wider, it's really not necessary. I have a little trouble with glue sticks sticking to no-show mesh for some reason. It doesn't always stick to no-show mesh. It must just be the consistency of the stabilizer. It sticks better to tearaways. So I didn't think about that, but you could give that a try. But if it's a little wider, I think it would be a lot easier. Because this is pretty narrow. I mean, these are little short sashings, so it is pretty narrow. So, okay, so we're going to get the other top up here. There we go. I don't have any trouble with the top and the bottom. I just have trouble with the sides. All right. So we got that trimmed. And now again, we're going to do the placement line for the fabric. There we go. Do a placement line for the fabric. And the next step is the fun part. When you start putting this together, it's really fun. And you can't. I mean, like I was trying to figure out where it started and stopped, and if you know what the pattern looks like exactly, you can kind of tell, but it sure doesn't look, you can't really tell it when you put it together. Okay. So here's the magic step. Okay, so what we're going to do, remember those little rolled up piece of tape? I'm going to put one down here at the bottom again. Now on these little narrow borders, you only have to use one. The wider border, I had to use a couple because they were wider. Okay, so then I'm going to use the rolled up tape at the top on this one. So I usually start out by just taping it down, but this one I'll use the little rolled up piece. Okay, so I'm going to put that at the top. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this back where we ended. So this is where we ended and where that placement line, you know, that cutting line was right here. And I'm going to fold this back on itself. We're going this way, so, okay. And I'm going to pull this closer so you can see. And I'm going to try to line this batting, the edge of my batting line here, and then here's my placement lines on either side. I'm going to line this up right on that line, try to push it down on that tape, and you can kind of tell if you got it nice and smooth there. Okay. Oops, got to stick the tail up through the machine here. And then I'm going to push this up, and then I'm going to pull this down and line up my lines all the way down. And then at the other end, I've got that other little piece of tape down here. I am going to line up my placement lines, and then I'm going to push it down on the tape at the bottom. So it's all stuck down, and now we're ready to do the second piece. I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the machine. Okay, and you're going to want to hold this because remember that fabric is not terribly wide, and it should basically go right on top of the stitches you already have. Because when you get up there, you'll know if you did a pretty good job of getting it lined up, because your placement lines or your tack down lines from before will match up to the ones this time. And this one, like you could see how it went across there? That I'm going to have to pick out. I think they just made a mistake on this particular design. So I just used my seam ripper, and now that I'm all tacked down, and now I'm ready to do the cute little hearts again. So it's going to go up there and start at the top and go to the bottom again, and then we'll do one more looping. Makes it look really cool. I really had fun doing these, and then the bigger one is really cute. I'll do a couple hoopings on would you like me to do a couple hoopings on one of the bigger borders too, the red borders? You do it the same way, but it's a little wider. So I'll do a couple hoopings on that one too, if that's okay with you guys. But I wanted to show you how I ended, because you can see we don't have a full hooping at the end of this one. So I can show you how I do the end of it. So almost done. They only take about 3 minutes, each one of these hoopings. You know, it doesn't take long. Okay. Grab my scissors again. We'll pop this out of the hoop. Just going to clip my little buttons up here. It pops my hoop open here. I'm going to trim off the stabilizer. But see, I've got this big piece over here, so I can put this back in the hoop. That's why I like using this hoop, because it's a little narrower and I don't waste so much stabilizer. You know, stabilizer costs money, so I like to conserve as much as possible. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull that little piece of tape that was out up at the top here, and pull that little roll of tape out of there. And we're going to trim across the top here, get that extra bulk out of there. And we'll go down the other side. Just be careful not to cut your fabric. Oops. Get that out of the way there. There we go. And I can do it, like I said, you can do this with your rotary cutter. Either way that works for you. I sometimes just do stuff with scissors because it's right here and I don't have to get up. So, all right, we're going to get that, and then we got to get this little piece out of here too. So here's my other little piece of tape. We're going to take that out of there. Stick it up here on the machine. We'll use it again, and I'm going to trim that extra bulk out of there. Okay. So we got one more hooping to do. Now these little stitches right here shouldn't be here. We're gonna take those out with a seam ripper at the end. Okay. So I've got my piece of batting, or my piece of stabilizer that will go back in this hoop, because I can get 2 hoopings out of one piece, which is great. Well, I know a bunch of you probably have this hoop, because I know a bunch of people ordered them a while back, and so if you have it, this is a great way to use it. Okay. This can't do very wide borders in it. You can only do like about 4-inch borders is the biggest one. So, okay. So there, I'm all ready to go again. I'm going to put this back in. We're going to use that same design again. Okay. And the first step, of course, is going to be the placement line for the batting. Get my scissors out of here so I won't drop them. There we go. And you can kind of see on the back, you know, where the 2 pieces come together. But, you know, when you look at it from the front, when I take those stitches out of there, you'll never know. So I'll take them out real quick while this is stitching. We'll get them out of here so you can see what it looks like about them. I think they just made a mistake on this design, because all the other ones don't sew across here. I was like, I wonder why it's sewing across there, and I just think they made a mistake. Okay, so now we got to put our batting in there again. Can't quite see the top, so I'm going to pull it out a little bit. Put our batting in here over our placement line. There we go. And we're going to do, whoops, get in there now. Then we're going to do the tack down line for the batting. So it really doesn't take too long to quilt the borders this way. It takes a little longer for the wide ones because the design takes a little longer. But I enjoyed myself. I kind of watched TV today and worked on these, so it was fun. I kind of hold the batting. But yeah, I think, Denise, the other thing you could do is you could tape your batting in place on the top and the bottom. Get the rest of these stitches out of here, maybe, so you can see the connection point. Yeah, when I went to go do the bigger borders, then I noticed that there were no stitches across here, and I thought, oh, I bet you they just made a mistake on that particular pattern. You see, without the stitches in there, you can't even see where it starts and stops. The way they have it digitized is so cool. All right, so we're going to trim our batting again. Get the batting trimmed. Whoops. Pull this out so we can see what we're doing. Anybody having any questions so far? Is this making sense? The pictures are really good in the instructions, so you can follow your instructions. And each set that you buy from Kimberbell, each block set and each border set has a set of instructions, and then there's a chart to tell you what to cut your batting and how to figure out what size you need and all that. So everything's right there. I gotta flip this hoop around here. I have a hard time with this hoop because of these big things sticking up when I go to trim, because I have to get it turned the right way. Trim down the sides here. I'm not being very neat about my trimming tonight, but that's okay. It's all covered up with fabric. You can't see it. Get those out of the way and do the top here. All right. Oops, got a little piece underneath there. No, you put the shape flex on all the borders, Janet. So they recommend shape flex. And then, see, some of the, like the pillow, some of the pillows have pieced borders, and they even tell you to piece your border, piece it into one piece, and then put the shape flex on it after you've pieced it. Okay, so the third step is going to be the placement line again for our border. So now I use the shape flex. So here's my bigger one. I was doing here's my bigger one. And see, I've got the shape flex on the back of this as well. The bigger border. Okay? So do you want me to show you one of the bigger borders? You want me to do like maybe a couple of hoopings on that one? So you can see what the bigger border looks like when you're working with it. All right, so we got our placement line again. I'm going to go get that tape, like I did before, the little rolled up tape. Put it up here at the top, like that. And then I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to take the other one and put it down here at the bottom. And I'm just using the same tape. It stays sticky quite a while. And then I'm going to pull this back on itself. Okay? Here's the part that we've already done. It's at the top now. And I'm going to pull this back. Now in this one, oh, you know what? This one we don't need the one at the bottom. Let me show you. Because, it's going to be a little short. You're never going to have exactly the same, exactly the same. If you're doing traditional quilting, do you need, no, I don't, Patricia, I don't put the shape flex on the traditional borders. No, I do not. And I don't on the extra blocks either. I just use it on the applique blocks. So no, you don't have to put shape flex on anything except the applique blocks for the traditional quilting. Okay, so we're going to put this up here. We're going to line this up with that. Here's that tape, and we're going to line up that placement line and feel where that batting is, the edge of that batting. Get it lined up best you can, and then I'm going to pull this down. Now this one's short, see? This one's going to be a little short of the full 12 inches because it was only about 33 inches, okay? So just make sure it's stuck down at the top here. And then I'm just going to take some tape and I'm going to tape it down at the bottom across the whole thing because your foot's going to go along there. And yeah, you might have to pick a little tape out of the stitches, but you're going to probably trim this off anyway, so it'll be fine. Okay, so I'm just going to tape all the way across, make sure I'm lined up between my placement lines here. It looks pretty good. And then tape across there, like that. And then we'll do this one. So the next step is going to be those tack down lines, so you might have to kind of hold it a little bit. Hopefully we got it lined up pretty good. Looks like it. Okay. It's going to go all the way down to the bottom because there's, you know, there's no fabric down there. It's pretty good. All right. There's our tack down line, and then the last section is going to be the quilting. All right. Do the quilting. And then I'll get ready, I'll find the stuff I need for the bigger border, because a lot of people said they would like to see a bigger border, so we'll do a bigger one, so you can see it again. Now I see that I got it up about 1/8 of an inch higher on this one, but you know what? You'll never see it. When I take the stitches out, you'll never know. So now, Patricia, I just do shape flex on the applique blocks for the traditional quilt, but I don't even use them like on the little piece blocks, you know, little 2.5 blocks you put together, and I don't do that. I don't put it on those. I didn't put it on that bigger block, that 6 by 12 at the end of the first row either. All right. So when you get down, you know, at the end, when you go off the fabric, you can just stop it then, because you don't need to go all the way to the end. So once it's off there, I'm just going to stop it. I'm going to cut the thread, and then I'll be done. Because I don't need to quilt it all the way down. Okay. And there is our border. The whole border's done. Then I'll take this out of the hoop. We'll trim it. And then when we go to place this on the quilt, or on my wall hanging, I'll have to, see I got a little bit high here, but when I take those out, you'll never know. And I'm just going to trim this off at the bottom, take it out of the tape, but then here's the whole border. All that little sashing, all quilted. And you have to do quite a few of these for the quilt. There's, you know, one in between each row, and then there's ones around. So you'll have to do this, you know, measure your sizes. You'll have to kind of put it together as you're going, so you know how big you have to make them, and measure your quilt. But they're 1.5 inches wide, and then whatever length you need. So there's the first border. What do you think? So I got both my sashing strips done now. That's cool. So we'll set that aside, and let's do one of the bigger ones here. Do a couple hoopings on this so you can see what it looks like. All right, I'm going to use my same hoop. Now, I did make my outside borders, my red border. I made my outside border narrower than it called for. I believe it called on the quilt for, you cut them 4.5 inches, but I wanted to make this wall hanging with them narrower, so I cut them 3.5 inches so that they're narrower, and that way it also fits in this hoop. That's, I kind of wanted to use this hoop, so I thought, well, that'd make it easier. So I went ahead and made them 1 inch narrower. And you know, even on the quilt, if you didn't want that wide of borders, you could do 3.5 inch borders and it would look just fine. So the We Whisk You Merry Christmas quilt had 3.5 inch borders instead of 4.5 inch borders. So okay, so I'm going to now look at my second one, and this one I'm going to still do, so my borders that I cut, instead of them ending up 4 inches wide, mine are only going to be 3. So the actual quilt has 4 inch borders, but I need then to choose the design that's 3 by 12. But I wanted to do the other one that had all the little mailboxes and the little birdies in it for the bigger one. So that one is border, let's see, Borders, and I think that one is, second here, yeah, Borders Valentine 1. So I chose the 3 by 12. The actual quilt, you would have probably chosen the 4 by 12, which is right here. So when we do the one more traditionally next week, we'll use this. We'll use the 4-inch one. But this one has 3-inch borders for tonight. So I'm going to choose this 3 by 12 design, and it's in my other border. So this one is Valentine 1, so I'm going to go back and get that design. Embroidery. Let's see here. So Kimberbell Quilting. Borders, Valentine, and this is Valentine 1. So this one's going to have the cute little birdies and the little hearts, little birdies and, and little envelopes in it. So it's really cute. Okay, I think I'm going to use this on my quilt too, my other quilt too. All right, so let's see, 3 by 12. So that's the finished border size. And again, I measured my quilt, and my borders ended up needing to be cut 40 1/4, the long ones, 40 1/4 by 3 1/2. And then that's what I cut these. So I cut my pieces here 40 1/4 inches long. Okay, so that's a couple of inches longer than I needed them to be, because I think it ended up being like 38. Okay, so I just cut them, you know, you want to cut them a couple of inches longer so you have a little wiggle room end to end. Okay. And I picked my 3 by 12 border piece. Next time we'll choose the 4 by 12 one, because that's the one I'll use on the other quilt. Okay? And we're going to do the same thing we did with the sashings. Going to hit embroidery here. And the first step again, it's all in the book. First step is going to be the placement line for the batting. And I got to find my batting here. Probably should check my bobbin thread before we go too far, because I may need a bobbin. And the thing that's neat about the quilt as you go, you can just use regular bobbin thread instead of having to put, you know, like matching thread in the bobbin when you're quilting the other ones. So I've just been using bobbin thread for all of this. It's a little bit lower so you can see. Okay, then we're going to place our batting. We're going to place the batting, whoops. And tack the batting down. So number 2 would be the batting tack down. Now I have to say it is a little easier to work, even though this is a little narrow. I would still tell you to add a 1/2 inch to the width of the batting. This wider piece is a little easier to handle than that little narrow one is. But I still would tell you to maybe cut them a 1/2 inch wider. And I just use up scraps when I do this kind of stuff, so. Because you're just cutting pieces anyway. So I just cut up, you know, little pieces that I have. Just going to go around it twice. Now the one thing at the end, we will talk about this a little bit. I'm going to talk to you about next week a little bit about this one too, because when I do get all my borders on and everything, and we have it sewn together, like this one is, okay, we'll talk about this a little bit more. You can see that I sewed it together with a 1/4 inch seam, all my blocks, and then I opened them up and laid them flat. I have to sew that other gray block on the end here yet. And then you need to measure so you know you're getting your borders the right size. But the one thing I'll talk to you about next week is we'll talk about the assembly, or how to put this together a little bit, as well as the other one. I stitch in the ditch. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a backing on the wall hanging. And that backing fabric, what I have learned, when I have done stitch in the ditch in the past, it seems like my backing fabric always wants to get really wrinkly looking, and I just don't care for the look of the back. But what I found out with this, and I got it to look really nice, and I'll show it to you before I finished tonight. I'll grab the wall hanging here. What I ended up doing is I put shape flex on the backing fabric before I attached it to the quilt, because then the fabric does not wrinkle on the back, and it makes the back look very nice and professional, and it's very smooth on the back. So I added shape flex also to my entire backing, and that really made the back look nice. Okay, so I'll show you the back of my wall hanging here in a minute. All right, so we got our batting trimmed, and now we're going to do the placement line for the fabric. So while we're stitching the little birdies, I'll show you the back of that. Whoops, looks like I unthreaded my machine here. Try that again. Every now and then I'll catch the thread, catch the thread with the hoop when I push it in and out. So unthreaded. And let's back up to the beginning of that color and get our placement line. Now this one's going to take 4 hoopings, so I'll just do 2 hoopings so you can see it, because it's the same as we just did with the 3 hoopings before. So I won't do the entire thing, but I just wanted to show you a couple hoopings with the bigger ones so you can see the difference in the way they look. And they have borders up to really wide. I think 6 inches is the widest ones. Yeah, 6 inches is the widest one, so that's pretty wide borders. Okay. So now I need to place this in those placement lines. The top again, I'm going to tape it. Instead of using the little rolled tape at the first one, I'm just going to put it above the batting about, 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and just tape it down. It was just faster for me to do that, like that. And then we'll use the tape rolls, the little tape rolls again, at the bottom. But this one you're going to have to use a couple of them because it's wider, so use one on each corner. Oops, there. Stick it on the other corner, so I have 2 of them on there. And I'm going to make sure that everything's straight in those placement lines. And then we'll push it down onto the tape at the bottom. Like that. Alright, that looks pretty good. Then, of course, the next step will be the tack down for the fabric. Alright, now this one you'll notice is going to tack down differently. It's just going to do the sides. So I just think there was a mistake on the other one. See, it's just going to go down one side, and then it's going to tie off over here, and then it's going to skip over here and do the other side. So I think that's the way all the border ones are supposed to be. They must have just had a mistake in the other pattern. Alright, so just kind of hold it so that it doesn't, and you can see it's a little easier to work with these wider ones than that little narrow one. That's why I wanted to do that one first. It's all tacked down, okay? And now we're going to do the little birdies and the letters. Alright, so we'll get that going, and I'll show you the back of the other one here. I hit my arm. Okay. So when I went to put this together, and I'm going to show you both of these pin-basted, I pin-based. So like I put the shape flex on the back of this backing fabric, and see how nice and smooth it looks? The whole thing looks so nice and smooth on the back. And then you can see where I have the stitch in the ditch. You can see my stitches in there. I usually use monofilament. And I was real happy with the way the back of this looked because it looked much more, I've always had that problem with that wrinkling on the backing because if there's no stabilizer, it's just so, we're blurry again, aren't we? There we go. It's just so wrinkly looking, and I just really thought this looked nice on the back. So it's nice and smooth. And I'll get my wall. All you're going to do is you're going to stitch in the ditch between the blocks. So like on this one, I stitched in the ditch up here, right in the ditch of the sashing, and on each of the blocks, Okay, and with the shape flex in there and the batting, it's nice and firm, and it makes a beautiful long hang. So I was real pleased with the way it turned out. Okay, so we're getting close to having that done, but I really thought the shape flex helped the backing. I've always struggled putting on, like, Anita Good Design, like their tile seams are often done that way too, and I've always struggled with my backing looking very wrinkly, and that shape flex just really did the trick, and I thought it looks really nice on the back. And if you're doing the whole quilt, you know, that's going to require some multiple pieces of shape flex on the backing, but that will make it nice when you go to put the back on, because it will be give you some body to the backing. Okay, so there's the first hooping. One more hoop. We'll do one more hooping before we end. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing we've been doing. We're going to take this tape off up here. Grab those two little rolls of tape off the bottom here. Then we're going to pop this out of the hoop. Isn't that cute? Can you see the little design? Oops. That stuff. Can you see the little design? Isn't that cute? With the little birds and the little letters on it. It turned out so cute. And then I'm going to trim the stabilizer away. On both sides. Just be careful, don't cut your fabric. The top here. So it does really go pretty quickly. And I just think it's so cool they have so many sizes, because you know, you can use this on any quilt. I mean, if you're doing a quilt that you're doing like 6-inch borders or 5-inch borders, then you'd have borders you could use on that too. So I thought that was really neat that they gave you so many sizes. Okay, so let's go down there, and we're going to trim off that little tail down here. Oops, can't get, there we go. Set my scissors down so I don't drop them on the floor. Alright, so there's the first section. Okay, we're going to put the batting, we're going to put the stabilizer back in the hoop here. Whoops, looks like I need to trim off the little tail here. And we'll put this back in the hoop. Clamp this down. And, oh, it looks like I got enough bobbin thread. I wanted to check my bobbin thread. I knew it was getting low, so. Alright, so we're going to go ahead, and, of course, the first thing that sews then is the placement line for the batting. And, you know, I've got to find my batting because it's somewhere here. Here we go. So when we do Hoppy Easter, we're going to do that in March, the Hoppy Easter bench pillow, we're going to do the whole thing quilt as you go. So for those of you who hadn't tried quilt as you go on the quilt, then maybe you would like to try it on the little bench pillow, because the bench pillow blocks are all small too, so it's especially if you have smaller hoops, machines with smaller hoops, that'd be a good one because most of the blocks are really small in that one. So. Do your typewriter words on felt get sewn down to the sashing, or do they stay 3D? They stay 3D, Lynn, but what I did with mine is they got kind of floppy and they wanted to flop forward. So what I did is I actually, after I did all the quilting and I was putting the embellishments on, and I'll show you this in the embellishments section, I actually glued them up with some hot glue. I just put a little dot of glue on the sashing just to hold them up, because most of the ones that I've been seeing are all wanting to flip down, so I wanted mine to stand up, so I put a little glue under them just to hold them up so that they wouldn't flop on me. Alright, so we're going to do our tack down for our batting. This has been a really fun thing to learn. I normally don't do quilts this way, and it's the designs are so cute, and it's easy, and I really thought the pillows would be really fun. Oh yeah, I removed the stabilizer, Lynn. It should be water soluble. So yeah, it's water soluble stabilizer, and if you remove it and don't rinse it much, it makes them a little stiffer too, which helps. So yeah, so it's on water soluble, and then on those you want to rinse it, and don't rinse it too much so they stay a little stiffer. So yeah, I removed it. All right, so we're about ready to trim again. I've been going through a lot of white thread. I had to buy more white thread the other day. Alright, let's put this down just a little bit so you can see. Alright, so we'll trim this piece of batting. Alright, oops. Hobbs batting is a little lofty, and it seems like it makes the design so cute when there's just a little bit more loft to the batting. So, and I'm going to quilt the other quilt when we do it in Design Center next week. I'm going to quilt that one with Hobbs also, because my other one is a little bit flat. I used some of my Dream Cotton, and it's a smaller loft, not as loft. Oh, yeah, if you use no-show, it's actually water-soluble in. But if you put a little glue on the back of it, you wouldn't have to trim it out. You could just trim it out of the edges, but then if you put a little glue like I did on mine, it will hold it up, and I don't think you'd see the stabilizer then. All right, so we're going to trim this. And then the next step is going to be the placement line for the fabric. All right, almost done. But it's just sort of magic when you get to see how it lines up. And I might need another roll of tape. I think I need another roll of tape here. Let's see if I got some tape up here I can use. All right. So for when we're doing the connection, we're going to go up here to the top, and we're going to put those little rolls of tape up here. But this one you're going to want to use two because it's wider. Okay. Like that. And then we're going to do the same thing we did on that little narrow one. We're going to roll this back on itself. This is going to be the part that we've already quilted is going to be at the top. Lay this down, and then I'm going to lay this down in the hoops. If I pull this down a bit, you can see it better. Okay. Get that batting lined up and line up my lines. It's pretty good. It's easier, just so you know, lots of times what I do when I'm doing this is I'll take it over to my cutting table and stand up and do this at my cutting table. It's a little hard on the machine, but I don't want to have to get up so you can see. So I've got that pressed down, and I can feel where the batting meets together there nicely. Okay. Then I'm going to pull this down and make sure that it's in between my placement lines nicely. And then I'm going to press down on the bottom. Oops, I have to put my bottom tape on. It helps, doesn't it? Let's put the bottom tape on too. Put the little rolls of tape on the bottom. And I'm going to line that up and press down on those so that it stays at the bottom. Okay, put this back in the machine. And the next step then is going to be that. So you can tell if you did pretty well because, you know, where your place or your tack down line starts ends on the other piece. It should start on this piece. So if you did well getting it lined up, it's going to turn out about perfect. I did pretty well on this one, so I must have gotten it pretty good in there. And you just kind of want to watch it when you're doing the edges. It is pretty close to the edge, so just hold it down. It's pretty good. All right. So it's all tacked down in there. And now we're going to do the quilting. I just thought it was kind of magic how they did this. I thought it was cool. All right, so then it's going to do the quilting. So are there any questions? This is a fun procedure. It's very fun. So just remember that if you want to do these designs, you have to go to mykimberbell.com, and they have a whole bunch of different ones you can buy, borders and blocks. So there's all kinds of different ones, and then you can mix and match, and you can use whatever ones you want. Okay? So I'm going to let this finish while we talk a little bit. Has anybody got any questions? So it's going to finish this hooping, and then I've got to do 2 more. There's actually going to be 2 more on this one because it's a little longer border. So, are there any questions about what we did tonight? This is a really fun procedure. I knew it would take us a little longer tonight than normal because there's a bunch of stuff. And then next week we're going to do the more traditional quilting in Design Center or IQ Designer in the machine. And then I am going to use a couple of these designs to do the sashings and the borders. Yes, those little scissors. Okay, so I'm still working on the scissors. All right, so let's talk about the scissors for a second. I have to talk to Tim about the scissors. The ones that I have are these little scissors. Now, can you see? These are the ones. These are from Floriani. I can no longer get these by themselves. They have these scissors, but they're in a set. You got to buy a whole set of scissors, and it's like $100. And I can get these from another place. So I'm going to try. I have to talk to Tim about it. But I like these. Can you see that these have a curved blade on them? And the other ones that I can easily get, and I bought some of these, but I don't care for them. You see how they're flat? And I have a harder time trimming close in because they're flat. They're not curved. I like these curved bladed ones. So I'm going to see if I can get these. These are the ones I got from Floriani years ago, and I'm going to have to get them from somewhere else because they don't have them by themselves anymore. So I am working on it, Patricia. It's going to be another couple weeks probably until I can get that figured out. But I really like the ones with the curved blade on them. So I am working on that. So remember to order your, and it just finished. So here's the second hooping, all done down here. And then I'm just going to continue on as I've been doing. I got 2 more hoopings to do. The last one's a short one as well, just like we did the little narrow sashing. But isn't that cute with all the little birdies and everything on it? So, all right. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I think next week we will continue on with the quilting procedure. We'll do the traditional quilting, and then I'll also do I'll just talk about the stitching in the ditch, getting the backing on this one and everything with the other one. We'll talk about that all at the same time. And if you have any questions about what we're doing, and how your blocks are going, make sure you text me, message me through Facebook, whatever. And we will continue on next week with more quilting. So isn't this fun? I've been really enjoying this project a lot. So I'm going to finish putting mine together tonight, I hope. So get the borders on it, and you just have to trim them. You'll have to trim a little bit, and once you've measured them, and then make sure they're all both the same size. Just like you do a regular quilt, you're going to make sure that everything's the same size, and you got to put your borders on. So it explains the order that they put them on in the book, so you shouldn't have any trouble with that if you just watch the instructions in the book. So no matter which way you're doing it. Do I sell the ruffler foot for the luminaire? Yes, I do. I think they have one in Davenport, Denise. Just ask them. Just call and ask Ron if there's a ruffler foot there. It's a pretty good size foot. Yep. So we should have them there. I know I have one in Iowa City. I can always send it down if need be. Okay. So if there's no other questions, I will see you next week. Remember to get your fill in the blanks, and if you need love notes and anything else Kimberbell, we got it all up on the website. I've been putting tons of stuff up there. So I will see everybody next week, and I'm anxious to finish working on my wall hanging here, so I think I'll finish it up tonight. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.